previous videos, I've spoken about how the gods in our myths represent certain things in nature and the universe, certain powers and energies. This is not just the case in the Norse beliefs, of course, but all European religions. Their myths are metaphorical, and the gods are certain personifications of different things. So, does that make us atheist? No, absolutely not. These natural things that the gods represent are absolutely believed to have a consciousness and a spiritual energy to it. All animist cultures around the world believe this at some point if we go far back enough. So the different mythologies that we find, they're just different ways of explaining what these divine energies are in a way that the said culture will at the time understand. That's why Odin has equivalents in the Roman and Celtic myths, slightly different, but it's the same deity if we go back far enough. That's why Thor's cognates in the Greek myth is Hercules, Indra in the Vedic myths, Jupiter in the Roman myths, Perkunas in the East, and so on. We can go on all day. We're all related religions and had the same proto-religion if we go back far enough. But of course, our people evolved separately over many thousands of years, and that's why our myths evolved a bit differently, but it's still the same spiritual divine energy that each culture throughout the ages is trying to understand and explain with their myths. These are not my ideas, guys. It has been, spoken about by historians not only in the past 100 to 200 years, but primary sources going back to ancient Greece and Rome speaking about these things too. These have been known for 2,000-3,000 years, and 99% of modern day pagans don't even know about this. It's not always that easy to find the equivalents in different mythologies, and we can't explain every parallel that clearly, but these sources that I'm going to go over here in this video are at least going to point you in the right direction. So they are called Interpretatio, graeca, romana, and germania. So they're not necessarily specific written text, but we can call them an ancient framework or interpretation or a discord, something like that. And it's the ancient idea of equating foreign deities to native ones. That's all, simple as that. And that we actually do have a lot of very old written sources for. So let's speak about the Greek sources first, the very oldest ones. Some of these sources are as old as 500 BC from authors like Herodotus, who mainly wrote about Egyptian deities, equating them to the Greek ones. Also lots of records of parallels in the various Middle Eastern gods at the time, when they too were still pagan there. Then we have Dionysius, who wrote about the Roman deities, equating them to the Greek. Then we have Plutarch, a very famous author a bit later on in time, who wrote about Roman and Greek deity equivalents. Just keep in mind that by this time, paganism was already on its downfall in the Mediterranean by the time Plutarch was living, and they were kind of losing the understanding of what their deities actually represented. These are what we call the cringe pagans on the last leg of their dying religion. That is opposite to, at the same exact time, the Celts or Germanic tribes, for example, who absolutely still had full understanding of their gods and to be certain parts of nature, more like animism than polytheism. And I'm going over those sources in just a minute. But then we can speak about the Roman sources as different names to different peoples, as it is said right here in this Latin text. Basically claiming right here that the deities were all the same everywhere and had different names. I don't quite agree there, that's oversimplifying it a bit, but hey, that's what he wrote, and he really was a great author, brilliant man. Then we have a very famous source, Germania by Tacitus, and this is where we finally get some sources speaking about our Germanic tribes. Also, he speaks a lot about the Celtic ones in the same book, Arigola, and making it easier for us to see. The Germanic names, they're not given, remember, because he was writing this book for a Latin reading audience, but some of the deities are very clear, such as the Roman Jupiter, Mercury, Mars, Nerthus, which we know clearly are Thor, Odin, Tyr, and Njord, of course, from the Norse gods, but remember they would be using their Proto-Germanic names at this time. He also mentions Castor and Pollux, the Roman gods. We're not sure 100%, but that could be Freyr and Freya. We're not 100% again. Then he mentions some other deities like Isis, and we have no idea what the equivalent was for that in the Norse or Germanic gods, but there are some good theories debated at the end of the day though, but I'll make another video on that. Unfortunately, there are not many others that we know for sure that we can equate to Germanic deities. There are a few, and this brings us to our next one, the Germanic sources on the matter. Now, of course, this is very difficult because the Germanic peoples did not have that much written sources at the time. I'm sure the Germanic tribes knew all this. They had knowledge of the parallels in the Celtic and the Slavic and the Baltic religions and the Roman religions. I'm sure they knew all that. We just don't have any written sources about it. But what we do have is our weekdays. Simple. When the Germanic peoples decided the weekday names that we still use today, actually, they took the parallel of the Roman deity that was on the same day of the week, and you all know these. All weekdays are named after Germanic gods. The only one in English that we kept the original Roman name of was Saturday, of course, after the Roman god Saturn, the god of seed and sowing. So the Norse equivalent, that would be Freyr, of course, but in Old Norse we call this day Laugadager, or Lørdag in modern Norwegian, so basically meaning bath day, because we weren't a bunch of filthy animals like the rest of Europe at the time, and the Vikings liked to take a bath every week on Saturdays. But anyway, that gives us at least 7 of Germanic gods' names that we can equate with the Roman gods. There's actually a really amazing chart on Wikipedia, actually, that I'll put down below with parallel deities in many ancient religions. And I think if we actually sat down and thought about it, it would be pretty easy to put the Norse and Germanic gods in this chart too. It's not always that simple, of course. All the Indo-European peoples come from the same proto-religion. But of course, the deities and the cultures and the myths trying to describe these same divine energies, they develop differently over time, and that's what we call our gods and the myths. But we are separated by some places 7,000 years of evolution, culture, climate, nature, language, and this drastically, of course, alters humans' perceptions of these divine energies called the gods. A perfect example that I always talk about is Baldur, the Norse god of light and sun. Baldur is the spiritual energy of the summer and light and all life and all living things that exist. When Baldur dies, winter comes and everything else dies. That's why he was the most beloved god in the north of Europe, and why it was such a tragedy when he dies, because when the light dies, we all die pretty much in the north. Nothing would grow and it would be winter all year. In the south of Europe, Baldur's equivalent is Apollo, the Greek god representing the same thing, the spiritual energy of the sun, the light, the warmth, but he is associated with other things that Baldur wasn't. Apollo is associated with energy, power, dance, prophecies, and things like that. So the Greeks believed these things, they could benefit in those aspects by using this spiritual energy of the sun and the light that they call Apollo. Again, very important god, but it was not life and death as Baldur was in the colder, darker regions in the north. It's a perfect example of how different myths and gods developing to be associated with different things in different cultures. Another example before I finish the video, we'll speak about Odin. In the Norse world, Odin is the Lord of the Frenzy. That's what his name means. He is this spiritual energy that can possess our body in frenzied, ecstatic moments like battle, dance, poetry, shamanic rituals, spiritual journeys, things like that. In Rome, Odin's equivalent is Mercury. But in Rome, Mercury is associated with financial gain, like commerce, eloquence, messages, divination even. Romans believed that this same spiritual energy could come and possess you and bring things like this. Of course, these are the things associated with Mercury. They're much more valuable in a civilization like Rome as opposed to the tribal, warlike culture of the north of Europe where Odin was a main god. So another one in ancient Greece, Odin's equivalent is usually believed to be Hermes, messenger of the gods. It's the same spiritual energy as in the other places, but here it's associated with the power that could travel in between realms and relaying messages and the power from the gods to humans. Also transporting humans to the realm of the dead, just like Odin's horse Sleipnir does. Also, there's a deity in Greek myths called Lyssa, who represents, the name means pretty much the exact same thing that Odin's does. So over thousands of years, the original deity that was maybe Odin before can split up into multiple in the myths, like you see here. You see what I mean? I definitely don't have all the answers, and I don't like to speak about these things either because I don't know enough about these other mythologies. Don't even get me started on things like the family relations of the gods. I see people focusing way too much on that, and it just complicates things even more. Even sources in the same religion don't agree on the family relations of the gods most of the time. If you try and compare that with foreign religions separated by thousands of years, we definitely can't explain family relations to be equatable that easily. So we can't look at everything like the cringe pagans and treat the gods like a big family of Marvel superheroes. It's much more complex than that. But like I said, I don't think it would be that difficult for us to work together, people who are knowledgeable in all these different mythologies, and compare things and figure out the truth and what our original Proto-Indo-European religion might have looked like. And yeah, so I think we can work on that pretty easily to discover the lost beliefs of our people. We are just very different cousins after all. That's all I have to say for this video. Hope you enjoyed and maybe inspired you to look into some other religions and look for some of the missing pieces that we don't have sources to answer in the Norse beliefs. So that's all. Hope you enjoyed. Vi ses nästa gång.